I can't believe it! He's not dead! That sick son of a bitch! Nevertheless, 169 picks up with the gang going to a sushi place, which, among so many other things, makes this chapter feel like a flex of Fujimoto's talents to be unorthodox while also masterfully hiding so many details behind the common mundane. I think that sentence made sense. As they are welcomed into Sushi Shi, they get to their table and in front of them is a splay of all kinds of sushi. And Digi, still stuck in the headlights, observes life a little differently now. After his first true sexual experience with a woman, sees the common man and woman eating food in a totally different light now. He contemplates, just like himself, did they also shoot their load by someone else's hand? Now, it's interesting that Fujimoto chose to use these words, which clearly paints the picture that something was taken from him. The phrase someone else's hand implies that autonomy wasn't a factor in his decision to be jerked off by Yoru. In other words, Denji is saying that these people could have also had something taken away from them too by someone else's hand. At first it's like, oh haha, they had sex or jerked off and came to eat afterwards, which yeah, I'm sure that's the case for some people, it's natural, but I think with the history of Fujimoto, he may have been implying naturally that much like how Denji had his virginity taken by force without consent, these people as well maybe had their innocence taken too, just not sexually, more metaphorically. How many of these men, women, and children had their lives turned upside down by devils? Society in Japan has all but crumbled due to the Chainsaw Man church incidents, as an example. Denji, like these other people, has experienced true loss, and through having his virginity taken, and oh, by the way, when I say virginity, I mean like just his first sexual act with a woman, not like literally in this case, of course, but his virginity being taken in this context could be greater symbolism and metaphor for society itself having their innocence taken, whether they wanted to or not. In many ways, it's a metaphor for growing up too, from being a child to becoming a man. Those important but delicate and big steps in which the person realizes the truths of the world. It's beautiful, it's a tragedy, it's unfair, and it's a little bit of desire all wrapped up, and Denji is stunned by it, unable to fully process or understand, and so everything he is experiencing is through the lens of trauma. He's trying to cope by applying his own feelings to his surroundings in search of some sort of answer to ease his aching heart and his restless mind. The traumatic part of this comes through with Denji talking to Pochita about his experiences, so how much bad stuff that has happened to him that he wants to die. And this line can be quickly glanced over in the wider context of the chapter, but it's important, maybe the most important line of the chapter when it comes to understanding Denji. This is him finally opening up a dialogue with himself about what he's gone through and how much it has damaged him, or maybe just a continuation. How much sorrow, pain, and sadness he feels because he's been repeatedly abused over and over, whether it's the women in his life, the family that was literally burned down by Barem not too many chapters ago, or his innocence that was taken by Yoru recently. The chicken, in other words, has come home to roost, and before his very eyes he sees plates full of food, sushi for the masses to eat as they try to forget their days full of horror. It's a subtle realization that life continues to go on even in the face of what is the apocalypse to some degree, that human nature can never change for better and worse, because if there is one thing people love, it's food. No matter what mood you're in, good food with good people can melt away the hazards of life almost immediately. It's a replenishment of body and soul. Seeing the sushi, Denji tries to understand what happened to him with Yoru. Now, on one hand, it didn't feel nearly as good as when he did it alone, so while the physical gratification lacked, in turn, the fact it made his heart a little bit more happy. That he could have a physical connection with someone like that made him feel nice. It makes sense, because physical contact, intimacy with another person, is so much better than just getting your rocks off. What Denji is saying is that intimacy between someone else, that physical contact was something new, something totally different. Sex is just an act. But when you combine sex and intimacy, something else is achieved that goes above and beyond just what is essentially masturbation in terms of the end goal, right? Intimacy is key. So it comes as no surprise that Denji is confused whether or not he is happy right now. And due to the situation he was put in, I'd say it's a little bit of both, to be frank. He had his innocence taken, that is a fact, and due to that, it is unfair, and yet another traumatic and bad thing that has happened to him. Yet, on the other hand, the experience of intimacy with another person was something unlike anything else. Denji is caught in this web of trauma that is now tied to yet another important experience, an important first. Because of Yoru's actions, Denji is now stuck between deciding what this was and what this means to him. And while Fami stuffs her face full of sushi, casually sitting here, she is the most guilty of these parties overall, I'd say, as she is the orchestrator to this madness, which makes her placement between Asa and Denji interesting. It's visual storytelling at its finest, right? With Fami being the red line, the wall that is stopping Denji and Asa from connecting genuinely. It's all through Fami's little plan, and due to that is keeping the two from talking it out and putting this situation behind them. After all, Fami, Yoru, and Makima are sisters, and this family has proven that they do not care for the well-being of Denji. They only want Chainsaw Man for one reason or another, so at the end of the day, it's all the same to Denji. Asa, seeing the blank look on Denji's face staring into nothing, gets annoyed, which makes sense. The girl is more autistic than, well, I don't know what a comparison could be, but you get the point. So she tries to excuse herself to Fami, but thinking to herself she in so many noises and bits of food, tells Asa that it's alright. Though Asa has no idea what she said, just adding to the purgatory that this moment likely is for Asa and Din Din. Alright, addendum here from Future Sea Tactics. While I was going over editing this video, I realized that I missed something pretty big with this chapter, and that is the use of hands. It's everywhere. From the very beginning of the chapter with, well, what is the guy at the entrance, using his hands to beckon them in. And then beyond that, you have multiple instances of just, for example, Barem at the end handing with his hands the sushi to Denji using his hands with the chopsticks to try and kill Barem for a moment. You even have, the instance of Bro Benny mentioning how Asa has lost an arm, which then gets into the whole thing about adaptation, which is what Barem is talking about later on. There's a guy that's calling for food using his hand. Hands are a big form of communication in human beings' lives. And also, hands can give you pleasure. For example, what happened with Denji. He experienced pleasure through that. There's just so many different avenues of life that you can experience through the use of your hands. And when Asa loses a hand, that's kind of that's a big detriment, right? But she learns to adapt to it. So I think Fujimoto was very, very deliberate in using symbolism with the hands to show that humans rely on these things so much to communicate themselves, and they can communicate through the forms of intimacy, as I mentioned earlier. They can communicate through the simple gestures of calling someone. There's many things that you can use with hands, and I think it was really brilliant that he went through with that and used it in this chapter. And I thought it was brilliant, so I wanted to mention that. But we learn from the others that the Nail Fiend and Akoku are back at the hideout, wondering if it's okay to be eating at such a time. Bro Benny, being a member of the Higashiyama family, decides not to eat anything yet, as he doesn't want to burden them with a bill. He's called weird, but he refutes by saying that Asa is much more weird for losing an arm and staying pretty much the same as she always is. Because for Bro Benny, if he lost an arm, then he'd be crying for a week. And in many ways, this shows the strength of Asa Mitaka to lose something so precious to her. She's still able to function normally, and while normally for her is just, as badass as Denji's normal, it's admirable and a testament to the willpower of Asa Mitaka. After all, it takes one tough son of a bitch to go through what Asa has. But for some reason, Mr. Psycho Bitch, Barem, is still alive and chimes in that animals don't get sad, they adapt for the sake of survival. This shows that Barem has a coldness to him, that he doesn't really have much or any humanity inside of him. Just like an animal, a cold survivalist, losing a limb means nothing. It just makes survival harder and more important. He says something peculiar though, that devils aren't supposed to feel sadness, or are they? This line may be hitting at Barem having a human and devil side to him, that the devil inside him is clearly the dominant factor in his personality, but doubts may be rising in him. Time will tell, not sure how to read that line just yet, but Denji, seeing him, immediately goes to stab Barem, showing that Denji didn't even have to think about what he wanted to do, just like an animal, I guess. He just went to do it, and the fact Barem tells him that he'll lead him to Nayata is the only thing that is going to stop him from ending his life. So he tells Denji to sit, and that the only way he'll let him see Nayata is if Denji saves him from the multiple public safety agents surrounding Sushi Shi. So it seems that next week we may be getting a big blowout fight between public safety and Chainsaw Man, maybe even Yoru and Barem? Though, with Fujimoto, you really can never truly tell what he has planned for these characters, so Barem could be lying, for all we know. Either way, what were your thoughts on 169? I'd love to hear about them. And as well, thank you for the hundreds of new subscribers. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys next week, because that sick bastard, the Bi-Weekly Devil, has been vanquished. Probably not forever, but we must keep up the good fight. Who knows, we may get 3 weeks in a row of new chapters. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.